What happens when we die?
Fear suddenly entered our life.
Some people say they've seen the other side.
And it opened up like a rip in the fabric of that reality.
They are no longer themselves. They are no longer in space and time.
We believe that the end of life is not well researched, and more research should be committed to this endeavor.
Is death the end?
There's no scientific proof that there is an afterlife.
Or is there something more?
It was really a miracle.
Christina Stein is a 19-year-old on her way to help teach kindergarten. She takes the same route every day. But now she's about to take another journey. One that will bring her face to face with death. It takes an hour and a half to cut Christine from the wreckage. It's a question that haunts us all. What happens when we die?
Fear suddenly entered our life.
Some people say they've seen the other side.
And it opened up like a rip in the fabric of that reality.
They are no longer themselves. They are no longer in space and time.
We believe that the end of life is not well researched, and more research should be committed to this endeavor.
Is death the end?
There's no scientific proof that there is an afterlife.
Or is there something more?
It was really a miracle.
Christina Stein is a 19-year-old on her way to help teach kindergarten. She takes the same route every day. But now she's about to take another journey. One that will bring her face to face with death. It takes an hour and a half to cut Christine from the wreckage.
Es war erstaunlich zu sehen, als wir diese Verletzung.
It was bad. Her aorta had a huge tear. She was bleeding internally.
Eingerissen war und frei nach außen.
It really seemed like a miracle that the girl wasn't already dead by the time she got to the hospital.
Überhaupt lebend ins Krankenhaus gekommen. Wir waren in der Nähe des Herzens beschäftigt.
We were working near the heart to stop the bleeding.
Diese
And suddenly, her heart stopped beating.
Aufzuschlagen.
On the other side of the world, in Virginia, USA, the Alexander family is about to face their own crisis.
That Sunday night, we thought perhaps Eben was getting sick. We thought, oh, he's getting the flu too. But we didn't think that much of it.
little bit of a cough, but so did the rest of the family. And then that night went to sleep fine.
But neurosurgeon Dr. Eben Alexander wakes up with pain far beyond a simple cold.
The next time I went back up, and I just peeked in to check on him, and he was having a seizure. He was writhing, just really, really agitated and shaking. And I said, "Say something." And he couldn't say anything. And so I immediately called 911.
They took him in an ambulance over to the hospital.
He was so violently agitated at that point. It took 9 people to hold him down, to put in the IV.
Then, Dr. Alexander falls into a deep coma.
It was rough. I remember when I first walked into the hospital, I remember very clearly when I first saw him there, and the room wasn't lit at all. And I remember getting close to him and then finally stopping. It just looked like all of the life had been sucked out of his face.
He was in a coma all that time, but there was that one moment, and our priest was there and heard it with me, that we heard him scream, "Help me, God, help me." And I said to our priest, "He spoke."
But those were the last words that he said.
Tests reveal Dr. Alexander has a rare antibiotic-resistant strain of bacterial meningitis. Ironically, this disease attacks the brain, his medical specialty.
Somebody in that situation really only has about a 1 to 2% chance of survival.
But simply surviving won't be enough.
One of the doctors said to me, "I'm really concerned about his mind." That meant that his body could survive, but he would be a vegetable, that his mind would not be there. And that brought on a bout of tears. Probably that was my worst moment that week.
It was just such a mystery because they kept on giving him doses of triple antibiotics and absolutely nothing was responding.
I definitely thought he might not make it.
Eben Alexander is slowly inching toward death.
For the vast majority of time, death is a process. It's not a moment in time. Most of us actually think of the moment of death as when your brain dies. That's when you're actually, as a human, likely dead. And that moment in time is not clinically easily delineated.
Eventually, life runs out.
They reach a point where the blood pressure goes to 0. They no longer have a blood pressure, and their breathing stops. This then usually is still accompanied by the heart giving electrical activity. And usually at the very, very end, you'll see a few gasps of last breath. And then you finally flatline. That's when we typically clinically declare someone dead. There have been situations when a patient is thought to be dead and then is able to resuscitate themselves or comes back. So we're very thoughtful and careful about this process before we declare someone clinically dead.
A respirator keeps Dr. Alexander's body alive, but meningitis has ravaged his brain.
The most disturbing thing to me was when the nurses would come in and lift his eyelid and shine the flashlight, the pin light into his eyes. He made no response. The pupil didn't get smaller or bigger, and that was not good.
Normally you want to have a reaction where the pupil will constrict, and that means that those parts of the brain that control that are functioning. The fact that his pupil response was not there, it means that the bacteria had gone so far as to affect some of these more resilient structures in the brain.
To his family, Dr. Alexander is virtually brain dead. In Germany, Christina's doctors are also losing their battle. Her heart will not restart. She has just minutes before her brain too shuts down.
Es wurden Defibrillationsschocks.
We were trying to jumpstart her heart with a defibrillator.
Zum Schlagen zu bringen. Gleichzeitig
We gave her several drugs.
mehrere Medikamente. Der Patientin hatte zu viel Blut.
The patient had lost too much blood. Her organs weren't getting enough.
Wo kein Mensch und ich am wenigsten
We really didn't think we could save her.
sein können.
Because Christina's heart has stopped pumping, many would consider her dead. Yet something seems to be happening with her mind.
Das nächste, was ich wieder weiß, ist, ja, dass ich wohl unter der Decke...
Next thing I know, I was hovering underneath the ceiling of the room. I could see down on myself laying on the operating table. And I saw the surgeons and heard them talking to each other. The scenario was pretty hectic. I realized that this was about life or death.
To help understand near-death experiences, some researchers focus on the content of these episodes.
A common element that occurs early in near-death experiences is what's called an out-of-body experience. At that time, the person seems to be able to see and hear things going on, but up from the vantage point above their body. Often what they describe are the doctors frantically trying to bring them back to life.
Medical science has an explanation for what's happening to Christina.
A near-death experience to a neurologist is first and foremost a crisis. Christine's brain was in a severe state of crisis. The switches in her brain that control consciousness malfunction. And it enters a very unusual, a strange borderland of consciousness where it blends waking consciousness with REM dreaming consciousness.
As they leave the body, they begin to traverse this connection. They begin to travel from what this life is to what there would be beyond this life, after this life, outside of this life.
I can't exactly describe how I got from floating under the ceiling to this special place that I went to. The whole world I found myself in was engulfed in a very warm, brilliant light.
The bright light that so often accompanies near-death experience to a neurologist means that the visual system has been very strongly activated. There are many ways to activate the visual system, and among the strongest is REM consciousness.
Christine's awareness of these heavenly realms is classic. Near-death experiencers often describe realms that are beyond earthly in their beauty. They often use the term heavenly realms.
It looked similar like Earth, but all the colors were much brighter and friendlier. Absolutely beautiful. And the ground felt like cotton, very soft and warm. I know this because I wasn't wearing any shoes. I was wearing this beautiful, long, pale blue gown. I thought that was strange because I didn't own a dress like that.
Nachdem das Herz flimmern nicht durch die Medikamentöse...
We couldn't get her heart going again. Medication and electric shock didn't work. All hell broke loose. We had to switch to manual heart massage.
Große Aufregung, Riesenspektakel.
But we just weren't able to restore any circulation.
Blutdruck eben herzustellen unter diesen Maßnahmen.
I remember I even begged God to help us because I thought we had no chance to save this young girl.
Dieser junge Mensch wird sterben.
In Dr. Alexander's hospital room, there is also little hope. But then,
on Friday, day 5, I felt that he was probably squeezing my hand. He would kind of try to open his eyes. It was so amazing.
He actually did open his eyes, went to pull the tube out of his mouth, and then he was breathing on his own.
The doctors said, there's been some help here other than us. We hardly knew what to do except to bask in the miracle of his being here.
But soon, the family realizes that despite the miracle, something seems off.
Even from the first few seconds when I was talking with my dad, I could tell that something wasn't right. He almost seemed like a zombie. He wasn't the same person. He didn't have the same amount of life in him that he had before. That was probably one of the scariest points, seeing, all right, now that he's back, is this who he's going to be for the rest of his life? Did it really take a toll that bad on him?
In the German city of Koblenz, Christina is going deeper and deeper into her near-death experience.
Ich habe ganz viele Menschen gesehen, und ich habe sie nach meinem Namen rufen.
I heard somebody call my name. I looked into that direction and saw 2 people coming towards me. And I recognized them, although I didn't really know them.
Wobei ich sagen muss, sie waren mir eigentlich
They were my grandparents. I had only seen them in pictures because they had both passed away a long time ago.
In dem Moment, als sie dann auch meinen Namen sagten und sie auch so aussahen, wie ich sie von Bildern her kannte, war mir klar, das sind meine Großeltern.
We have scores of near-death experience accounts that describe meeting someone during the experience that they instantly recognize, and they know it was one of their deceased ancestors or someone who's part of their family. Sometimes it's a deceased ancestor they never even met, someone who died even before they were born.
I suddenly realized I was in heaven. I knew it because I had met my dead grandparents, and I had learned as a kid that when people die, they go to heaven. And really, what else could this place be?
What kind of thoughts do you expect a person to have when they're facing their death? It seems very natural that they're going to think of loved ones, both living and dead.
Very often in these unearthly or heavenly realms, people will interact with other people that appear very much like they knew them during their earthly lives, but with one important difference. Even if the person had been very chronically ill when they died, people in near-death experiences that are encountered are essentially always picture-perfect health.
Besides my grandparents, I recognized 2 more people I knew among the crowd. Both had been sick and passed away, but in heaven, they were healthy.
Alle Menschen, die ich gesehen habe,
And this goes for everybody I saw. They were happy and beaming, all smiles.
Im Gesicht und ja, es gab mir zu verstehen.
So I understood that all dead people are in a very happy place here.
Christina's vision of heaven was peaceful. Dr. Alexander says he too went on a journey during his coma, but it was very different from Christina's.
I existed in this underground, boiling, muddy, surrounded by dirt and mud. I had no memory whatsoever of my human life, had no words, no language, and just this pounding, monotonous machinery-type sound deep beneath me. A strong sense of roots, black, fine roots. It seemed to go on for years and years, if not eternity.
Dr. Alexander's near-death experience is far darker than most.
A few percent of near-death experiences contain frightening imagery and are actually frightening to the near-death experiencer. Now, we don't know why some people have a frightening near-death experience and some don't. It doesn't seem to have anything to do with that individual's prior lifestyle, their beliefs, anything at all.
While doctors try to save Christina, her near-death experience is about to take an abrupt turn.
Very typically, there's a dialogue, often with other people with them, about returning to their earthly body.
Meine Großeltern sagten mir dann,
My grandparents told me, your time has not come yet. You have to go back and fulfill a great mission in your life.
Finally, I was able to apply the clamp above the tear in the aorta. We regained a little bit of blood pressure. Then her heart started beating again, and we could stabilize the circulation with blood transfusions and medications.
Woran ich mich erinnere, ist, dass ich dann unterschauen konnte.
I was able to look back at myself on the operating table, and I heard the surgeon call out, "We did it! We got the girl back!"
Wir haben es geschafft, wir haben die Kleine wieder. Es war so, als ich geweint habe bei der
I
Verabschiedung.
cried when my grandparents said goodbye, because I wanted to stay with them in heaven.
Nach etwa 2 Stunden waren wir mit dem Eingriff eigentlich zu Ende.
After about 2 hours, we were finished with the surgery.
Ob wir rechtzeitig genug gewesen waren.
Christine was stable,
Des Kreislaufstillstandes.
but we had no idea whether we had done it in time or she would end up with brain damage.
Das war zu diesem Zeitpunkt noch vollkommen unklar. Ich entsinne mich, dass sie
I remember Christine crying during recovery. It is very unusual. Normally you don't have people waking up in tears.
Natürlich verwirrt. War auffällig. War sehr auffällig.
Christina does recover and claims she has a revelation.
Also ich weiß, was ich erlebt habe.
I know what I experienced, and I know with absolute certainty that I didn't dream it. This was not a dream. My near-death experience really happened.
Hier war nun ein Mensch, den ich persönlich kannte, den ich sogar...
Here's someone I know personally, one of my patients, who tells me that she watched the desperation on the operating table. That's pretty incredible. But she really described it just like it happened.
Original wiedergegeben.
When someone is in crisis and lying in a hospital bed, They may appear comatose to the medical staff because they're not moving, but in fact, they're taking in a very hyper-alert state, everything that's going on around them. They'll hear conversations, they'll know who's in and out of the room, they'll see things through half-open eyes. From this, they may form memories, maybe very accurate memories, and it can become part of a near-death experience.
Still, it's hard to believe someone can float 2 meters above the operating table and hear everything we say. It's tough to accept that, although I think Christine is a credible and totally genuine person. It actually scared me that she talked about this kind of stuff. I can only speak about near-death experiences from my personal point of view because as a medical doctor, I have to reject them. There's no hard evidence. Come on, it sounds like gibberish, nonsense. Angels singing, bright lights and tunnels, and everything is great? It can't be. It must be some sort of delusion.
Also ich kann ganz klar sagen, ich glaube an den Himmel gibt's.
Heaven exists, even though science can't prove it. It's not just in my mind, it's reality.
In meinem Gehirn, ist Realität.
Nehmen den meisten Menschen das ab.
I believe that most people who say they've had a near-death experience did have some sort of experience. But I don't think it's reality. More like hallucinations caused by dying brains.
If Christina's experience was a hallucination, she's not alone. Millions of people have reported having near-death experiences.
The term near-death experience is somewhat of a misnomer because you don't have to be medically near death. We found in our research subjects that one of the most common causes of near-death experience was fainting.
Near-death experiences can occur under a multitude of circumstances. Cardiac arrest is a common one. Auto accidents, illnesses, surgical complications. For people that are resuscitated from a cardiac arrest, meaning their heart stops, about 10 to 20% of these people will describe a near-death experience.
Dr. Long's research shows that almost all near-death experiences are reported as joyous, and that only a small percentage begin like Dr. Alexander's underworld nightmare.
I have no memory of my life. I have no words, no language, no knowledge of humans or this universe. Just this bubbling, foamy, dark underground.
Suddenly, Dr. Alexander's experience changes.
And then, out of nowhere came this spinning melody of light. And it opened up like a rip in the fabric of that reality. And I was coming up out of this darkness into this beautiful, verdant valley. And I was a speck on a butterfly wing. And these choral chants would come to me as these colors in the billowing clouds against the deep blue black sky. One of the most precious memories was that indescribable comfort of that unconditional love, with the divine presence coming through the entire scene, and this incredible understanding of that. You are here to learn many things, but you're not here to stay. You'll be going back. Many people who have had NDEs come back and they are completely flummoxed by how powerful that love is at its very core. And I think just being able to convey that to this world in meager language that we have to try and describe things.
After his coma, he is not necessarily become more religious, but he's definitely become more spiritual.
Eben Alexander and Christina Stein nearly died. Their traumatic experiences propelled them into a select group. People who believe they've glimpsed the afterlife.
The similarities of the stories are very striking.
Undoubtedly, past personal experiences and shared cultural experiences color a near-death experience. We draw upon memories in near-death experience. In fact, that's one of their prominent features.
Understanding death as part of religion, I do think it has been a major influence in getting people to consider the idea of whether or not there is more beyond life. It certainly is integral to religion. It has been a major factor in developing religions and in influencing what we think and how we feel about life after life. There is cultural conditioning that occurs from birth.
If a child is attending Sunday school and is immersed in religious teachings, it's not a surprise that they would see Jesus if they had a near-death experience.
And Dr. Nelson believes there is a more basic reason why near-death experiences have similarities.
People have similar near-death experiences because they have the same underlying biology producing these experiences.
In fact, one researcher may have recorded the brain generating a near-death experience.
I'm an ICU physician. We take care of critically ill patients. These are the sickest patients in the hospital. And to some degree, some of these patients are so sick they're beyond our medical care, and they pass away. We try very, very hard to make sure our patients die pain-free. That generally means that we give them an adequate amount of pain medication. In order to make sure that our patients are comfortable, we often use an EEG monitor that helps us know what the level of consciousness for our patients. As the patient approaches death, the level of consciousness as measured by these EEG devices goes down to very low levels and then eventually goes to zero. So at this point, they're no longer breathing. And this is essentially a patient who has now passed away.
After they die, the patient's monitor shows a surge in brain activity.
The level of spikes that we see are comparable to a person who's wide awake and talking. This spike often lasts 2 to 3 minutes. And I want to impress upon you how amazing this is to be sitting at the bedside, looking at a patient who is effectively dead, who has an EEG monitor at the level of someone who's awake, alert, interacting with you. This is a very striking finding. The reaction from the physicians and the staff and the nurses to this spike was quite variable. Some thought it was quote-unquote spooky and didn't understand what to make of it. The timeline for the spike is that it almost always occurs as the person's blood pressure goes to zero. We have yet to see this occur in a patient who has a normal blood pressure. We speculate that for some patients who are resuscitated and recall this event, that this could form their quote-unquote near-death experiences. I do think some of this research makes them think that there might be an actual physiologic basis for this, and it's not something which they just imagined.
Dr. Alexander disagrees. He now believes consciousness occurs outside our bodies, and that this accounts for the experiences he had during his coma.
I'm an academic neurosurgeon. I spent More than 20 years in neurosurgery at major medical centers. The longer I was in that field, the harder it was for me to see any way that consciousness could exist after the brain and the body died, because I thought that the brain was necessary for supporting consciousness. And then I had a profound near-death experience. And the profound thing was that there was no place in my brain for that to all occur.
Dr. Alexander says his meningitis created an accurate simulation of death.
The reason that meningitis is such a perfect model for human death is that meningitis attacks the whole outer surface of the brain, the part that makes us human.
The top layer of the brain, neocortex, controls thinking and language.
These are my CT scans from the third day of my illness. What we're looking at here is that there's pus all over the surface of the brain and going down into these fissures, these little cracks that you can see here.
Dr. Alexander is convinced he had conscious thoughts, even when the meningitis shut down his brain.
So the meningitis, by wiping out the neocortex, inactivating my entire neocortex over that week, made it impossible for that kind of rich, incredible experience to happen in my brain. It strongly suggests that rich conscious awareness can occur completely independently of the brain.
But Dr. Nelson remains skeptical.
There's no evidence that experience can exist outside of the brain, and there's no way that Dr. Alexander or anyone else can know when these memories came to him. It could have been during his recovery. In fact, he himself understood that his sense of time was lost.
Dr. Alexander and Christina both say that their near-death experiences changed their beliefs. But one woman in Hong Kong says her near-death visions gave her miraculous physical changes. Anita and Danny Moorjani had been married 7 years before their lives changed forever.
It was April of 2002, and I felt a lump on my collarbone on my left-hand side, and I went to the doctor to have it checked out. He did a biopsy.
The test results arrived 3 days later.
We were both sitting in the doctor's clinic, and he just came straight out and said to us that he'd run the tests, and what she had was Hodgkin's lymphoma, which was a form of cancer.
I was numb. I was actually really numb.
Fear suddenly entered our life like it had never, ever been there before.
It continued to progress and get worse and spread throughout my body over a period of actually 3 years and 10 months. I had decided against chemotherapy because I watched my best friend and my husband's brother-in-law both die while having chemotherapy, and it appeared to me that it was the chemotherapy that was actually killing them.
Anita takes alternative treatments, but gets worse.
My lungs were filled with fluid. I was breathing with the aid of an oxygen tank. I had open skin lesions. I weighed about 80, 85 pounds because my muscles had all deteriorated. And so I just started to come to terms with the fact that I was going to die.
Anita's time is running out.
On the morning of February the 2nd, 2006, I didn't wake up.
The oncologist actually said to me, these are her last few hours. She's not going to make it through the night. If there's somebody you need to call them now. And I think it was at that moment that I felt, I guess you could say, I almost felt the life drained out of me.
Throughout the night, Anita seemed lifeless, but her mind was churning.
During this experience, I felt as though I crossed over into another dimension where I became aware of things far beyond that hospital room where I was in.
Anita Moorjani has vivid memories of seeing the afterlife.
I became aware of my best friend who I had lost to cancer. I had been in a lot of guilt because I didn't spend her last days with her because it was too painful for me to watch her die when I was dealing with my own illness. When I met her in the other realm, all I felt from her was unconditional love and understanding. She completely understood why I wasn't there, and it was just really amazing. It was such a relief for me. I was given a choice as to whether to come back or whether to go onward into death. At first, I absolutely wanted to go onward into death because this realm was so amazing. It was just so beautiful. And also, I didn't want to come back into a sick body. But then, the next thing that happened was I started to understand that if I chose to come back into my body would heal very quickly. My best friend seemed to say to me, "Go back and live your life fearlessly." And it was from that point on that I started to open my eyes and come out of the coma.
I guess that was one of the happiest moments of my life. I mean, I could feel myself ecstatic, probably the happiest person in the world, the happiest person in the universe.
But Anita's body is still riddled with cancer.
I kept saying, "I'm going to be fine. I know I'm going to be fine. Don't worry about me."
My initial reaction at that point was like, "Yes, dear." And I was thinking, like any medical professional, yes, there's been damage, there's been oxygen deprivation.
But Anita's situation takes another unexpected turn.
Even though everybody thought that I was in a coma, I didn't realize I was in a coma because I was aware of everything that was going on around me. When the doctor walked in, I recognized him straight off, and he was very surprised because I started to tell him what procedures he had done on me, and he was very, very surprised. He said, "How do you know you were in a coma?"
When she started telling us things about that had transpired, I mean, it was pretty quick that I realized that, okay, there's something here that's not quite normal.
Not quite normal turns quite miraculous.
Everybody started to get really, really surprised, and within 4 days, my tumors had shrunk by 70%. Within 3 weeks, they couldn't find any cancer with all the tests they were doing.
There's some medical literature describing how rare spontaneous regression of malignancy is. Now, that happens perhaps only 1 in 100,000 cases. And by regression, I just mean the cancer gets smaller. For it to completely go away is even much rarer yet.
Several doctors looked into my case after this happened, and each doctor has come up with a different explanation. The doctors that treated me, they feel that it was their treatment. I believe it was my altered state of consciousness. As soon as I realized the truth of who I really am, I knew that I would be healed.
Anita has associated two very fortunate things: her near-death experience and her cancer remission. Although she had them together, that doesn't mean that they're related by cause.
Anita Moorjani, Christina Stein, and Eben Alexander all came within a breath of dying. They returned to health, convinced they had a glimpse of life after death.
It was just absolutely stunning.
I really feel that when I talk to people about this, that I'm simply reminding them of something that they know at a very deep level.
Life after death defies current scientific reasoning.
This topic seems rather esoteric, and there's a lot of anxiety and insecurity surrounding it. But there's absolutely zero science.
The belief in proof of heaven is a matter of faith, not a matter of science.
Real or not, near-death experiences have real-world effects.
Life after our lives has given people hope. We do know, for example, from psychological studies, that people are much more resilient to the slings and arrows that life hands them.
Also ich habe jetzt selber gar keine Angst mehr zu sterben.
I am no longer afraid of death. That doesn't mean I wouldn't care if I died tomorrow. It's not that. I look forward to dying when I'm old, because I know that there will be something else after this life, and I have seen it. And that is a really wonderful and comforting thought for me.